And we're live. Well, hello. Thank you for being here. My name is Mick Hayes. That's Mick like Mick Jagger and Hayes like Isaac Hayes. I'm a guitar player and singer, and I hesitate to call myself a songwriter. First of all, because I've met some real songwriters, and there's a definite difference between what I do and what they do. But I'll say it this way. I write songs just to get stuff off my chest. Things I've gone through, things I'm going through, and hopefully things I'm over with. That said, I have to take you back to 2015 and tell you a story. Now, before we go any farther, being that this is the first episode, I just want to say that I'm using this in place of traditional therapy. For years, I've gone on stage and I've said for, any interview I've ever done, I'm like, when you see me on stage, that's literally me dealing with my problems. Now, around 2015, my calendar was full, but the quality of gigs were changing, which meant that the frequency of gigs was changing. And then, which leads me to where I am here today, almost 10 years later. But in 2015, as I said, the quality of gigs were going down. A couple of places that I played at annually wanted to renegotiate, and everything that I had that was bread and butter gig back home in the Western New York area, which is where I'm from, specifically a suburb outside of Buffalo. Everything was changing, and I didn't really see an end to that. And the last thing I was going to do after spending all that time getting my name and value, we'll call it, up to a specific level, I wasn't going to start kind of coming down. So it seemed to be a good opportunity to go for a dare to be great situation. So I had this relationship that I'd kind of, made contact, I should say, through the internet and such in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, to go and record at legendary Fame Studio. And I kind of put it off a couple of times. It didn't seem like the right time, but eventually I just kind of took the leap and put all my ducks in a row and all my eggs in the same basket, or whatever cliche you want to use there. But I didn't let anything prevent me from cutting any corners. I put it all on the line. All of my funding, all of my savings, I should say, all of my funds, and did not, and I mean this, did not cut a corner at all. Hired the best photographer I could, hired the best mix engineer I could, hired the best master engineer I could. It was everything within my power to make a better life for myself. The only thing that was out of my control at that point was COVID and how it affected the world, aside from my world, that is, in March of 20, which I guess is a good point to say. That's when my record was supposed to come out on Record Store Day in March of 20. Now, at the time, my distributor, my publicist, everybody cautioned me to hold off, which obviously was the best idea. At the time, they were just saying we needed a couple of weeks to flatten the curve, and that was what we were going to do. We're going to ride the curve, right? But it's really funny, too, is we're like, everyone's all relaxing and sitting at home and kind of taking a load off. And I'm just like, man, I was just ready to get out and tour and do this. But as long as you don't, and it's kind of looking at myself in the mirror and just saying, as long as you don't get fat, all right? You just spend all that time getting yourself into shape. I say that with a smile on my face. You should see me now. Anyways, so my publicist, everybody said to hold off. We held off until May. And it was like, we spent, at that time, it was about 2 years making the record. And we held off, but still didn't look like things were going to start opening up. So we came up with a new plan, a new strategy. The new plan and the new strategy was to do a promotional tour, much like a traditional radio tour, just go around from city to city, state to state, and meet with like YouTubers and influencers, and anybody can help us at that point, because traditional radio stations were closed. Everybody was going remote. But we were going to do our best. So my publicist put a lot of that together. In the meantime, I had a videographer friend of mine come up to New York and start the tour with me, and to just gather footage and content for this YouTube channels and stuff like that. So our first big stop was actually in Cleveland, where the record was pressed. By the way, that record's called My Claim to Fame. I should have mentioned that earlier, but we're going to have some growing pains through the course of this. And we got through about the first half of the trip and ended up in Memphis, Tennessee, and everything was basically being canceled going forward. So now we had 2 people eating 3 meals a day, plus hotel rooms, plus gas, food tolls. It sounds like a quote from Spaceballs, but yeah, we were averaging. I'll say this much: we were spending a lot of money daily on this, and to have everything being canceled going forward, and we had a full 3-week tour ahead of us, so things got a little disheartening. So I talked to my publicist in the morning. From a Memphis hotel room, and we were both kind of, out of ideas, best way to say it. She had asked if I had a guitar with me, and could I potentially go and play at supermarkets, because that was basically all that was open. So I didn't want to stand in the produce section and kind of cry my eyes and heart out, and try to, perform my songs the best way, which again, with this record, it's got, it's basically a 10-piece band on almost every song. It's a 4-piece horn section with female backups and all that stuff. It's just going to be me with an acoustic guitar in the produce section singing through a mask. It just seemed real. I was like, no, it's just not a good idea. So the best thing I could come up with is, because I had boxes of my record in the car, was to go to local music stores and music stores along the way and be my own salesman and get them to wholesale buy, hopefully a whole box, but even copies would have been great at that time. Get them to buy copies of my record in order to put it out on their shelves. It's, again, in retrospect, it seemed like a great idea. So the first record store I went into, we had to make an appointment, and it was in Memphis, Tennessee. And the guy was an old curmudgeon. Clearly been in the business for far too long. And I tried, in between customers, to just connect with him on what my intentions were there. And it just really seemed like he wasn't having it. So instead, I decided to go up and down his aisles, and all his records were really affordably priced. Now, mind you, this has since changed, but that's kind of where the story's going. All his records were really affordably priced, and I just had to ask him, I'm like, why are your records so cheap? And it was just like a movie. It was like literally looking at a magazine, and he would lift up his head and spoke to me through his mask. And he says, what do I care if somebody wants to tour Graceland or any other recording studios and grab a couple of Elvis records on their way home? My old lady's happy. So I kind of giggled. I said, oh, you're the my old lady guy, So at that time, I kind of came up with this plan, and I texted my wife. I said, I'll explain to you when I get to the next hotel room. We were traveling on through Mississippi and all that stuff later that day. And I started, at that point, filling my car with local records to sell in the resale market online. So I did that from Memphis, Tennessee, all the way through Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and then all the way back home through Buffalo for the next, it was another week and a half. So in total, it was a 3-week tour. I think I said that already. So I came home, I pulled in my driveway. Of course, my wife and my dog greet me. I lift up the hatch, and she says, what is all that? And I said, this is it. This is the only other thing I know. So if I'm not able to go back to work, now mind you, I've been a professional musician since 2001. And here it is. It's 2020. I'm in my 40s at this point. Nobody wants to hear me say, would you like fries with that? Do you want to upgrade to a combo meal? And I'm stuffing my CD in the in the bag. That's your Happy Meal treat. Here's my CD, right? So I'm not going to be able to do any of this. And I've been around records since I was a kid. As a matter of fact, I inherited 2 record collections when CDs were all the rage. I inherited 2 record collections, and that's kind of what made me into the musician that I am. All the kids were on the bus listening to Michael Jackson. I was listening to Freddie King. Thank God it was on a Walkman. I'd have got made fun of, But I digress. So she thought it was a kind of a cool deal. At least it was still entrepreneurial. And I didn't have to, like I said, say, would you like fries with that, or figure out what I was going to do with my life. So we did. So I set up first on eBay, and we went out to dinner. I believe it was that weekend. And I found a rare 45 actually in a small music shop in Muscle Shoals, which I knew it was special. I knew because it was on a small label. And in the instance with 45s, a lot of times it's a band who made one record. They made two sides, and that was it. And they broke up, and then maybe somebody went on to fame, and maybe two people went on to fame, or maybe nobody did, But I put it up online, and next thing I knew, the bidding war had happened, but I had a buy it now on it, which was over $100. And we're sitting at our favorite taco restaurant, a Mexican restaurant called El Ranchito in Clarence, New York. And my phone lights up, your auction has ended, or, so-and-so has just bought your item. And it blew my mind. And she looked at me, she goes, what? She thought something was wrong, so much going on in the world at that time. And I said, well, I guess dinner's paid for. And I spun the phone around for her to see. And she's like, oh my God. And I said, yeah, I sold a record. That's crazy. I've never done that before. And that's kind of where this whole thing really kicks off. So that was my pivot. Like I said, the writing was on the walls in 2015. And aside from, all that stuff, that's the inception of my story. So I contacted my lawyer and I asked him, I said, if I were to use this record label that I started called Move the Needle Music, if I were to use that to sell, used music, is it set up that way? And he said, absolutely. You can do whatever you want with it in that sense. So I did. So we had our first sale. Now all of a sudden I start thinking again that I'm going to do this. This would be a great way to have money coming in on the side once gigs start again. Instead of always teaching guitar lessons and doing voiceover stuff and doing radio jingles, and money always comes from a lot of places in this industry. But this could be a cool way of doing it, and I get to garnish kind of my collection on top of it. So the next thing we started doing was kind of organizing this thing. And then I took a trip to Motown, and I'm like, what a great opportunity it would be to be in Motown buying Motown records and then have that for a sales pitch. And I bought Nashville records in Nashville, and I bought Muscle Shoals records in Muscle Shoals, and I bought Atlanta records, and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, we went to Jamaica a couple of months later, and my intention was to go into Jamaican record shops and come back with rare reggae 45s and all that stuff. But that's a whole nother story. But it starts to grow. So now I'm in Motown, and I meet this woman. She's a complete sweetheart. And she's got, a household that she lives and all this stuff. And she's looking for some side money. So I kind of make this pact or a plan, I call it what you will. And I ask her to start buying records for me while I'm gone. So we kind of came up with this grading system based on numbers. I told her, this is a 1, we can't do anything with it. This is a 5. This is kind of like, I'm not that interested in it unless it's something kind of rare, but anything above this, usually I can sell. And she was good. She sent me a number of packages in the mail from the Detroit area, with really great records that were definitely a 5 to a 10 grading, in her world. And all of a sudden now I was basically that I had pickers in different parts of the country, and we're starting to see some growth. In the meantime, still there's no gigs. Everything's still in this limbo stage, and we're now approaching a whole year at this point. It's like March. And I bring my mother into the business. My mother's recently retired, and she's looking for something to do. So I go out and I buy 4,000 CDs, and I have her start doing the CDs. And I'm like, this is going to be a great way for us to build positive feedback. Yeah, somebody will come by and they'll buy 3 to 5 CDs, and they'll be happy with what we sent them. We'll be happy with our service, and then they'll leave us positive feedback, and that will disarm the customer who's going to buy a $200 record or a $500 record or more. And then my wife starts helping, and then we get invited to a Facebook group where they do live auctions with vinyl. And we do our best to, again, continually brand ourselves. So now we've got a logo, we've got a name, we're starting to make a name for ourselves, and it's really, really exciting. Things start getting bigger. We start running promotions. We had our Big Spender December thing, which was where we ordered a bunch of brand new records because we put in all our paperwork to carry new records as well. And we ordered brand new records, and anybody who spent $100 with us on used vinyl got their pick, of like 5 records. Every week we did that promotion. And then I started buying celebrity collections. Like, it was really, really spinning in a good, we'll call it it was just heading in a good direction. And then like I said, it was March, and we had our biggest week of sales ever. And I mean, ever. We did over 250 pieces in 1 week. Which was that's like on par with a brick and mortar store. And in some cases, it could possibly be more than what a brick and mortar store does. And I felt great about it, man. I'll never forget. I put my head down on the pillow that night, and my bills are paid. My wife is beside me. My dog's beside me. I don't have to, deal with the trailer brakes not working, the trailer lights not working. I'm not dealing with this. I'm not dealing with a club owner that doesn't want to pay us. I'm not dealing with grumpy musicians in the band who are complaining. I'm not dealing with all those things. The worst thing I got to do right now is maybe go to a couple of sketchy doorsteps to buy records. That was about the worst thing I had to really encounter. So I laid my head down, and again, if you could picture this literally like a movie, again, I just put my head back, folded my hands behind me, and I realized that I shipped over 250 records that week and not a single one of mine. God, that stung. Literally. I can still feel it, man. It's like an echo in my head. And all that time and energy that I put into it. So here I am selling used Led Zeppelin records and used Queen records. And I'm paying off the debt that I created to pay off, to make a better life for myself. And really having that argument, you look in the mirror and you're like, did I make a better life for myself? Or did I get away from who I was? And this is, again, where the therapy thing starts to come in. So now, like I say, March to March, we're about a year into it. And I'm starting to notice some things. I'm just starting to notice I'm a little off balance. I'm not as physical, as I used to be. Again, you go on stage with 8 to 10 pound guitar every night, and you're working out, and I'm not doing any of that stuff. The heaviest thing I grab is a couple of crates of records. Everything's different. My body's changing. I'm just grumpy. I'm eating all the time. I'm always, on the road in a bad sense. Driving around. I started driving around the country. It was really crazy. Which is actually another thing I should point. At one point, I would drive around the country for 2 weeks buying records and meeting other music store owners and, buying bulk stuff. And I did a whole trip across Canada the one time. It was really a lot of fun. I would have live auctions in hotel rooms. It's just a lot of positive growth. And the whole time I'm doing that, my mom's doing the CDs back home, and my wife's keeping an eye on the inboxes for me, and everybody's happy, except for me. I wish you could see my face right now, because that's kind of the case. Everybody's happy but me. And I'm just trying to figure out who I am again, It's really funny because about a year later, and I just kept it kind of tucked away. That all those emotions that I got rid of on stage night after night, now they're all kind of bottled up inside of me. And some of the sellers and the people that I got to know on a very personal level said something to me. It was basically last year. They said that, that the vinyl bubble was going to burst soon, that things were going to change. Personally, I didn't believe that at that time. I actually saw a shift, kind of something different to me. I kind of saw a record industry, the music industry at large, that was starting to realize that they were losing a lot of money in the resale market. And I'll give you one example. Mr. Big's Lean Into It was a record club only press. I believe it was Columbia House. It was a record company only press. It was worth over $100 at that time. And the last thing any record company wants is, a guy like myself making that kind of money on used records. So what did they do? They repressed it for Record Store Day, and completely just about diminished the value of an original copy, because now you can go get one, And there's a lot of little learning curves like that. But and then there were guys that were saying that new vinyl sucks and all this stuff, and it's like, man, until recently they haven't made a new record press since the 80s. We're talking about like Chevette technology here. Like there's nothing wrong with a new record at all. As a matter of fact, my collection's starting to go the other way. But that was kind of where I started to see things differently. And life was coming back to normal, or a new normal. No political debate there. But life was getting a little more normal, and sales were starting to kind of dwindle. People weren't that excited anymore. And I think personally that because so many of these Facebook groups popped up and so many sellers had, kind of popped up, that people got burned. There were a lot of instances and where, someone got a record that wasn't graded properly or what have you, or it didn't show up, or they sent somebody money and that guy ghosted, or gal, whomever it may be. And we've heard some of those horror stories, which is why we've been real upfront about our business and had a lot of success with being just, forthcoming and approachable, and you could reach out to us just about 24 hours a day. But I started to see that people were in music stores again, and that buying collections wasn't that easy anymore, and that people were moving around. And the worst thing I saw at that point was what was going on in me and who I was becoming. Now, mind you, there's still a guy that wakes up every morning and listens to anywhere from 2 to 3 records while he's having his morning coffee. And I'm still very balanced there. It's about the time that I have to come into my shop and start cleaning and prepping records and shipping orders and stuff that I'm okay, but I'm starting to shift. And then by around 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, I don't know what to do with myself. I want to play guitar. I want to sing. I want to get rid of some of these emotions. But instead, I got to figure out how I'm going to sell these 8 copies of the Doobie Brothers' greatest hits, which are worth less than $10 a piece. And I got to figure out if I can promote my own music somehow throughout the course of the day. And I start really kind of going through those ick feelings of like craving something I know that like it'll probably drive me crazy. And I've said this before in between sips of beer at the bar. It's like, getting back into the music industry is like dancing with an ex-girlfriend. It's like, man, that's great, man. She looks great. I'm so glad you took care of yourself. And part of me kind of missed you, but I know where this is going and I know how it ends. But yet for some reason, it won't leave me alone. Damn it, I want to walk away. But I can't. So, officially, it's 2024. It's coming up on March. We're into February already. And I'm pivoting back. I've made a lot of changes over the last 6 months, and a lot of things have changed for me against my will. And we'll get into all that in later episodes. I was hoping to keep this one short today, and it looks like I'm doing all right based on previous experience. But I'm pivoting back. And I'm going to start gigging again. I've got actually my first gig right now is in Atlanta, Georgia in April at the Northside Tavern. I'm excited about that. And then whatever I can scrounge up between now and then. I was with a friend of mine the other day, Michael Britt, very, very talented guitar player. I realize how many times I say this because it just kind of comes off really easy. But I'll say that the COVID era of things kind of took away all of my pride. That's really true. There was a time that I would scoff at an open mic, or I would scoff at, like, I don't do that stuff. It's not because I'm arrogant. It's not because I have an ego. It's because I've done all that stuff. So it's funny the way the world is today. Someone comes across your name Like if they come across my name today or tomorrow, and, this is the first time that they've heard of me. It's like they don't know about, all the gigs I did in the 90s, in the late 90s and mid 90s too, in early 2000s. It's like we're many, many years into this. Life didn't start at social media for any of us musicians. As a matter of fact, it's another kind of issue or problem I have, air quotes, with these, young guitar players, and people send me videos all the time of some kid that can, play guitar. It's like, man, most of our parents didn't do that. Some did, but most didn't. It's like, well, my parents didn't. My mom recorded one concert of mine, which I've got on a VHS tape somewhere, and it's pretty awful. But again, it's just a different world nowadays. So I'm pivoting back. For almost 4 years, I've represented a company called Move the Needle Music, which is something I'm still very proud of, as a used record, CD, cassette, 8-track, and music memorabilia store. And again, we can get into all this stuff. If anybody has questions, I guess leave it in the comments or whatever, but I kind of don't know what's going to be interesting to people or not. Like I said, for me, this is therapeutic. I've tried having websites. I tried all that stuff for this business, and I'm not putting it to bed by any means. I've sold off a lot of my back stock, and I've actually even sold off some of my inventory. But what I'm doing right now is kind of pivoting back. And as I get money back out of that business, it's going to go back into me being in the music industry. But I guess if you have a takeaway, if you've made it this far, thank you, first of all. But if there's a takeaway for you, here's my advice to you. If you have to pivot to survive, and I'm finger pointing right now, if you have to pivot to survive, do it. Don't hesitate, especially if you have somebody to be responsible for, i.e. children, wife, husband, whatever it is. If you have to pivot to survive, then do it. In this case, I'm pivoting back to survive in a different sense, because that was the thing that kept me the most balanced. There really is a reward to going to somebody's doorstep and buying a crate of records, and there being 5 artists in there I've never heard of before, and I get the opportunity to hear them for the first time. And again, those of us who are old enough to remember what streaming, what music was like before streaming, like sometimes you went to the music store and you bought a record and took it home and it stunk. You bought it because the cover was cool, whatever. So now I get to go to somebody's doorstep and buy a whole crate of records and listen to them all and decide if I'm keeping what. So that there really was a reward in. And there were a lot of times that I was inspired or whatever you would say there. But something has changed in me. I've been writing for the last 4 years. There were periods of time when I didn't play for months. The thing that I love the most, I started to hate. And now, every morning, just about, I force myself to play one of my guitars and see what's in there. What did my brain do all night long while I was sleeping? What was I creating? I don't put any ideas in front of me yet. I do this before I play a record in the morning. A lot of times I do this between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning. When I get up, I make the coffee and I'll grab a guitar. I'll see what's in there. And the music I've written is some of the most unapologetic, best way to say it. And to tell you the truth, I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm afraid that it's not for everybody. My music's always been not for everybody, but I'm really afraid that it's not for. It's for even less people than it ever was. But I can tell you with the utmost sincerity that it's going to be the most honest thing I've ever done. When it comes out, it'll be me bleeding between the grooves. And yes, there will be a record. Somehow I'll find a way. But I think that's it. I think that's the takeaway. I think that's where hopefully you're going to benefit from this. I know that I will. And I hope that things get better for me. And I hope that somehow I get closer to you. So thank you for listening.